Mutants! They come in all shapes and sizes!
They do. Some are more popular than others, and some have better powers.
But sometimes the ones that may not seem impressive at first will turn around and surprise you. Sync has the mutant ability of power mimicry, meaning, like Rogue, Sync can copy the powers of other mutants. Unlike Rogue, Sync has the benefit of not doing harm to whoever he is borrowing powers from, and he can also do it without physical touch. Recently though, after being resurrected, Sync got a bit of a power boost, and he may even become a new Omega level mutant. In the story, Sync not only uses his normal mutant powers to replicate the abilities of the mutants Sunfire and Cyclops while they were both nearby, but is also able to tap into Jean Grey's telekinetic abilities while she is literally all the way chillin' on Mars. Sync's growth in power post-resurrection was first noticed back in 2021's X-Men number 18, with Sync documenting that he was now able to sync not just with mutants, but other superhumans as well, which is quite the boost, and I think it just keeps going up and up and up. In the House of M alternate reality, Sync even got to the point of permanently retaining others' powers, which would be an incredible significant power boost as well. As a main member of the X-Men though, it's kinda hard to be surprised he's getting power boosts, so.
At number 9 is Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy is usually undervalued because he looks really silly, and I get it. He does look like if the drummer for Kings of Leon had 57 eyes, but you should never judge a book by its cover because although Eye-Boy doesn't look very menacing and seems rather confused most of the time, he's actually got a pretty good power set. He's got the ability to see just about anything, no matter how small and no matter how far. But on top of his microscopic and telescopic vision, he can also see basically every light wave there is, including X-ray, infrared, and thermal, among many others, including the magical plane as well. He also has night vision and even chemical detection. That's right, he can see pheromone secretions from people, giving him a tracking ability as well. Eye-Boy is just one of those sad cases where he's just too unsettling looking to really garner much respect for who he really is and what he's truly capable of.
Number 8. Domino. Nina Thurman is a mutant weapons expert and mercenary. Under the name Domino, she was introduced in the early 90s as a member of X-Force. Domino is a survivor of a bunch of unethical scientists who were trying to create the perfect weapon. Tale as old as time, really. But this means Domino has all the talents and skills you would expect of an expert mercenary or secret agent. But we're here to talk about powers, and Domino's are unique to say the least. Domino has probability manipulation powers, meaning she is almost always lucky. She exudes at all times a subconsciously activated field that alters the probability of occurrences in her line of sight in her favor. This means that whenever she is stressed, excited, or focused on something, things will go improbably well for her, and quite poorly for her opponents. Now there is a caveat to this. She needs to actively be trying to help herself for her power to work. So like, if debris is falling from the sky and was about to hit her on the head, she would still be hurt if she just stood still. But if she tried to avoid that debris, she would move perfectly to avoid each and every piece about to hit her. Now the full potential of Domino's abilities hasn't actually been fully realized yet, and Marvel has a knack for updating powers whenever they want. But with an ability to be lucky, there's only a finite amount of things you can't do.
At number 7, we've got Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not might also be a case of people judging a book by its cover because he doesn't really look too menacing, if we're being honest. But to be fair, his powers do also sound pretty lame at face value, so it could be that. Basically, this mutant can't be remembered by anyone he meets once he's out of sight. And as sad as this must be for him in his personal life, Forget-Me-Not can use this power to his advantage in a huge way in the right circumstances. In one case, he's even able to dupe all of X-Force when the team has to form an elaborate plan just to track him down. They're only able to finally catch him by having Dr. Nemesis record himself explaining to the team the existence of Forget-Me-Not as they search for him, and they keep watching it over and over again on their coffee breaks. And the only caveat to this whole situation is that the maintenance bots, along with, I'm assuming, any computer automated system, can remember Forget-Me-Not, which sort of weakens the potential for his powers in a way. So although he's more powerful than you might think, he's still got some vulnerabilities, but heck, everyone does, right? Forget-Me-Not.
Number 6. Dust. Created by Grant Morrison and Ethan Van Sciver for 2002's new X-Men number 133, Soraya Kadir is a young Muslim mutant who's enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. Now, she has largely been just a background character in the stories she shows up in, but Dust has been present for some of the largest events in recent X-Men history. Soraya was even one of the mutants who kept their powers after M-Day. Soraya is usually a pretty shy and quiet girl, but don't let that fool you. Her powers are no joke. Dust is able to transform into a cloud of sand, or dust, and even act as a violent sandstorm, literally stripping the flesh from her opponents. When she couldn't properly control her powers yet, Dust even unintentionally flayed 2 men alive after unleashing her power in an act of self-defense. Dust has also been shown to use her power internally, meaning like inside another person, entering her enemy's lungs and eroding them from the inside out, which is just a lovely thought. But wait! There's more. It also appears that Dust is immune to magic and telepathy based attacks in her sand form. The only problem is that if you pull out a hose or like a super soaker or something, she's pretty much done, as she's extremely vulnerable to water. She's a powerful mutant, but sorely underutilized.
At number 5 we have Marrow. I've covered this mutant in almost every one of my lists for the last few weeks now, and for good reason. She is just such an underappreciated mutant considering how versatile and honestly cool her powers are. And if you are a Marrow diehard fan, you know that she's had some difficulties with her powers, which might explain part of the reason why people tend to write her off. Initially, Marrow is unable to control the growth of her bones, which leaves her with some pretty painful and frankly terrifying looking struggles. But these days, she's honed her powers and has become quite impressive as a result. Her extreme bone growth allows her to eject super durable spikes from her skin, and then she can use them as weapons. She is adept at hand-to-hand combat, so this, paired with her ability to literally grow her own weapons and then heal up without issue, makes her pretty unstoppable.
Number 4. Jubilee. Jubilee's energy plasmoids might actually be one of the most potent of the X-Men's arsenal. The plasmoids aren't fireworks, even though they look a hell of a lot like them. They're actually closer to superheated plasma. She can create a bolt of bright light, but she can also push out enough power to bend steel or destroy a tree. And with precision can even detonate microbursts inside someone's brain. So that's the amount of range we're talking about here. But that ain't all. It goes even beyond that. As Jubilee's Generation X instructor, Emma Frost, once speculated, if wielded properly, Jubilee could detonate objects on a subatomic level, meaning this unassuming mall rat can cause explosions of atomic proportions. She's a highly underrated character in the comics and gained a lot of popularity in the 90s thanks to the X-Men TV show. And while she's gone in and out of having powers, she still remains one of the cooler characters in the X-Men's lineup.
At number 3 is Morph. Morph might sometimes be underestimated because of his funny disposition and his somewhat harmless look. With one of the best personalities out of all the mutants in my opinion, Kevin Sidney uses humor to work through his internal issues after his mother's death. But externally speaking, he deals with his other issues using his totally underrated power set. Morph is a master shapeshifter, capable of changing his body and his voice to mimic those of others. Not to mention, he's also able to fly at speeds of 40 miles per hour and has a healing factor due to his ability to manipulate the makeup of his molecules. But what's coolest about his powers is that if he chooses to grow more muscles, his strength will actually increase along with his appearance, and even if he can't get his strength up to match his opponent, his defensive stats are insane due to his ability to absorb the impact of any physical projectiles by simply allowing them to pass through him.
Number 2. Gambit. Gambit has the really cool mutant ability of molecular acceleration, allowing him to convert the potential energy of a non-living object through touch and kinetically excite the molecules to the point that they explode. Usually when a mutant has an ability that manipulates molecules, they have a pretty vast array of powers. But for Gambit, he mainly uses his abilities as attacks, charging up his signature playing cards and bow staff. But in an alternate universe, there is a future variation of Gambit known as New Sun, who is what Gambit would be if he reached the full potential of his power. He can manipulate kinetic energy down to a molecular level, meaning New Sun can charge objects and living beings without being in contact with them. He can stop objects that are in motion and make still objects begin moving. He can turn into a wave of energy, letting him travel through space and other dimensions, and he was even able to defeat the Dark Phoenix in his own universe by himself. We do see 616 Gambit use a lot of the same abilities as New Sun in a fight between the two in Gambit's 1999 solo series, but just knowing the potential this awesome Cajun sensation can reach, ooh, it's spicy.
At number 1 is Chamber. Chamber is another underrated mutant with a power set that isn't quite appreciated the way it should be. It may have something to do with the trauma that Jonathan Starsmore goes through to acquire his powers, and further how that experience hinders him from achieving certain goals that other more accomplished mutants are able to. Basically, Chamber has what's described as a furnace of psionic energy stored in his chest, and when his powers are first discovered, this energy explodes out of him, destroying the lower half of his mouth and blowing a hole in his chest cavity, forcing him into intensive surgery to reconstruct the lost body parts. Eventually, he hones his powers to a point where he can aim psionic blasts on command, which is kinda like Cyclops, except in this case it's coming out of a hole in his chest. But what's more is that Chamber later learns that he's in fact a descendant of Apocalypse, and he is eventually properly reconstructed by Clan Akaba in the appearance of Apocalypse. Although this leads him into a depression, Chamber then gets a huge power boost from this modification and changes his name to Decibel before joining the New Warriors.
Number 10. Kid Cable. He might not be as powerful as the old man or as wise, or for that matter as powerful as some of the other youngsters on this list, but Kid Cable has a ton of potential. And to be fair, he is pretty powerful when it comes to outwitting people and working his way out of some pretty sticky situations. He also has the Summer family waiting in the wings to back him up when he needs. While their power is obviously not his own, having both his mom, Marvel Girl, and dad, Cyclops, as frequent allies, as well as his sister Rachel, is something that should be noted, because there are many times these days in the Dawn of X line where we see this family supporting one another and teaming up. Cable has his powerful telepathic and telekinetic powers, as well as his love of big guns and big swords, to help him qualify as one of the most powerful and sometimes resourceful teen mutants around. Number 9. Jubilee. Jubilee is one of those mutants who also has the potential to be even more powerful the older she gets. As a teenager, her powers were more unpredictable, but she still had that potential to create mass destruction using them. A lot of people think of Jubilee's powers as just being a fun display of fireworks, but she can actually create explosions on a subatomic level, meaning that she has the potential to go nuclear under the right conditions or with the correct amount of training. Her emotional connection with Wolverine gave Jubilee enough power to decimate part of Mandarin's castle when Logan was in danger. While Jubilee might not have seemed like the most powerful teen mutant, she definitely was capable of more than most give her credit for. So now she's pretty much all grown up though, with her son, who's currently a dragon, Shogo, to look after. But she was a teen once, and when she was a teen, she was pretty powerful. She was pretty cool. I like Jubilee, she's one of my favorites. Before we move on to our next point, just a reminder to give that like button a little click. Just give it a little click. It really helps us out on the channel and lets us know that you are loving these mutant lists. And who doesn't love mutant lists? I love mutant lists personally. Let me do more of them, please. Click the like. Number 8. Prodigy. Prodigy is one of the smartest mutants around, and even when he was depowered, he was still pretty powerful. David Elaine was always known for his intelligence, but when his mutant powers activated, he became even more brilliant. His powers allow him to telepathically absorb the knowledge and skill set of those around him. Initially, he worked towards not using his powers and keeping them a secret, trying to resist them because he felt that any knowledge gained this way while he was a student was sort of cheating, which, to be fair, I guess it kinda is. Eventually, he ended up joining the New Mutants and enrolling at the Xavier Institute. Even when he lost his powers, he was still considered to be one of the brightest now depowered mutants around, as he still had the knowledge and skills that he had already absorbed and learned telepathically. He still held on to that. But now he's back to being a mutant because Krakoa. Number 7. X-23. Or as we know her now, just Wolverine. As Logan says, you just call yourself Wolverine, there can be two of us. Laura Kinney was created and raised to be a fighting machine. It was all her mother could do to sneak in some normalcy to her daughter's routine. Also, the story of how her creator was forced into bearing her and literally become her mother in that way is pretty messed up. But then again, Laura's whole story is pretty messed up, so there's that. Even as a little kid, she was trained to become an unstoppable killer, and even when she found her way to freedom and the X-Men, as well as Wolverine, her genetic father, who she was a female clone of, she wasn't even even safe from a world of killing. She was such a good killer that Cyclops couldn't resist recruiting her to the X-Force, the mutant team that was sent in for less savory and more secretive Black Ops missions. Number 6. Elixir. Josh Foley's powers first manifested when he was just a teenager, like most mutants. Right away, they were pretty powerful, allowing him to heal people who had life-threatening injuries on the verge of death. He was originally a part of the anti-mutant group known as the Reavers, who kicked him out after learning that he was a mutant, severely beating him when he wouldn't accept their rejection. He just wanted to hate mutants still, but no, you can't, because you are one. Sorry. His parents also disowned him, and with nowhere to go, he was forced to join the Xavier Institute, despite not initially being interested in joining his fellow mutants. Elixir's powers were shown to be so powerful, even from a young age, that he could even heal powers that had been lost, giving Rain, who he had a crush on at the time, her powers back after she lost them when he kissed her. And to people who are like, but healers, are they that great? Because what if they get hurt? He can even heal himself, so yeah, Elixir's pretty cool. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. It's really hard when we are talking about Kitty because I personally just think her mutant powers as they stand are so overpowered. Just in my opinion. We also have to consider that Kitty Pryde kinda got fast-tracked during her time on the X-Men team. When Kitty joined the X-Men, she was basically a teenager and she was already pretty powerful. In fact, she could walk on air back in the original X-Men days. And Kitty also didn't have any trials on other young X-Men teams. She was kind of just put on the X-Men right out of the gate. So that is pretty crazy. Straight out of the gate, she was working with the pros. Of course, over time, she has had some of her weaknesses tweaked and even removed, but in exchange for some of her other secondary abilities kind of being lost. Teenage Kitty also went on tons of adventures that were just always seemingly adding and building on her skill set list. And even now as an adult, Kitty, or Kate as she currently prefers to be called, is still one of the most powerful and often, in my opinion, underrated mutants that we have on the X-Men roster today. Number 4. Magic. Magic is insanely powerful, even as a teenager, simply because she spent so long training with the powerful magic user turned demon who kidnapped her years ago, Belasco. Belasco wanted to harness Illyana's powers for himself, seeing her great potential. She eventually became so powerful that she defeated Belasco in his own dimension of Limbo. When she returned to her own dimension, escaping, she was no longer a little girl, though barely any time had passed on Earth while she was gone. It had only been seconds for her fellow mutants since she left, but for Magic it had been years, and she returned as a super powerful teenager with a strong connection to Limbo. While in Limbo, actually, Magic is basically a god, as being in Limbo puts her closer to her power source and effectively makes her almost undefeatable while there. Number 3. Jean Grey. Even when we see any teen versions of Jean, they are known for usually being very, very powerful. While we might now know Jean as an adult woman who is immensely powerful when she needs to be, or when the plot requires her to go into Phoenix mode and kind of act as a deus ex machina, we also have met younger versions of her thanks to various time traveling shenanigans. Even as a teenager and a child, Jean is often portrayed as being exceedingly powerful. In fact, when she originally met Xavier, her telepathic powers were so great that he was forced to put up mental blocks to protect her from them until she was better equipped to handle such an elevated level of power. And after a few adventures with the X-Men, she did get those blocks removed. She was ready. She was ready for the power. Number 2. Hope Summers. Even as a baby, Hope was super powerful. Hope's just blowing everybody else out of the water. She's like, I've been powerful since I was a little baby and I didn't even know what was going on. She was like, object permeance, what's that? But also, I have immense power. As a teenager, Hope was destined to be the new host of the Phoenix Force, but was prevented from connecting with the Phoenix. However, she was still instrumental in the Avengers vs. X-Men story when she helped Scarlet Witch to erase the Phoenix Force from existence near the end of that story. Even though that doesn't really make much sense now, given that apparently Scarlet Witch isn't a mutant and Hope's powers are to kind of amplify or adopt the powers of other mutants in her area, so that doesn't really make sense now, but anyways. Like Rogue, she can take on other mutants' power sets and even take on multiple at a time. The difference being she doesn't need physical contact to do so, and it does not drain the powers of life energy or life energy of the mutants whom she is emulating. As a baby, she was so powerful As a baby, she was powerful enough to heal Rogue with one touch, who at the time was dying and comatose. You also basically know you're powerful when you're a mutant when you get your powers earlier than your teen years. That just means you're like the most powerful. Number 1. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I can't have a list with a name like Teenage and Mutant in the title and not mention the TMNT. Even though I know everyone's probably like, but Amanda, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are not more powerful than Hope Summers. What are you talking about? But this is my list and I want them to be number 1. So that's how it goes. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are definitely some of the most powerful pizza-loving Teenage Mutant Turtles out there. They might not be as powerful in terms of taking other people's powers or becoming a host of the Phoenix Force, but I also bet if they were able to become the host of Marvel's Phoenix Force, were they in the same reality, they would potentially even give Jean and Hope a run for their money. The other thing that makes the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles so powerful is that there isn't just one of them, there's a whole team of them. And working together, there is almost no force of evil that they cannot stop.
Number 10. Artie. Arthur Artie Maddox is an interesting one. His mutant abilities manifested when he was just 11 years old, leaving him disfigured and mute, but granting him the very interesting ability of visual telepathy. This means that Artie can connect to his or others' thoughts, and he can project those thoughts as psionic holograms or pictograms. This is really useful for Artie, specifically as he is a mute, but at the same time, I gotta say I think that regular telepathy would kind of be a bit more useful, and I don't know. Doesn't matter because Artie's power is more cool, because he can even make large-scale holograms and use them in battle, usually for defense. But Artie can also perform something called a mind lock that allows him to paralyze someone physically or mentally. I kinda hope he keeps evolving his powers, but we'll see. Number 9. I Scream. I Scream, that's I, like this, or Scream, like is a villain of the X-Men who decided he needed to destroy the X-Men using their Danger Room. He actually got pretty far in that plan too, and he was able to overload Cerebro, taking down Professor X temporarily. Now I'm going to assume he did that by giving the device a brain freeze, because if you hadn't guessed, Ice Scream can turn into any flavor of ice cream, and then everyone screams for Ice Scream's ice cream. No, that's not true, sorry. But using his abilities, he was able to enter the X-Men's mansion and the Danger Room before Xavier came back too and lowered the temperature in there, freezing Ice Scream's ice cream form, which is when a clown turned him into a banana split and split from the scene. Just go read Anoxio the Clown from 1983, you'll get it. Make sure you guys check out the other videos in this series and drop a like on this video to show us your support. Number 8. Peeper. Peeper, or Peter Quinn, first appeared in Captain America Annual number 4 in May 1977 as part of Magneto's new Brotherhood, a brotherhood of verbally based villains: Slither, Shocker, Lifter, Burner, and Peeper. Seems like a bit of lazy writing over at Marvel to me, but this group actually went under a couple different names under a couple different leaders, including Mandrill and the Red Skull. Peeper though is definitely the most interesting of the bunch, and he's also more relevant as he has appeared recently as part of Abigail Brand's sub-team called the Six. On this team, Peeper played the role of the Eye, using his abilities to examine Chiron or Kerbon particles. That's because Peeper has the gift of telescopic, microscopic, and X-ray vision using his enlarged eyes, but he also had an offensive ability in the form of yellow or red concussive optic blasts. He also seems like a decent dude, despite usually being a villain. Number 7. Brew. Saying that a mutant is unique kind of feels redundant, as most mutants have pretty unique abilities from others of their kind, but Brew is even more unique as he is not a mutant of the human race. Instead, Brew is a mutant of the incredibly violent and parasitic insectoid alien race known as the Brood. This essentially means he can actually feel compassion and friendship, and he was born separately from the Brood hive mind, meaning he is not loyal to a Brood queen. He also possesses super genius levels of intelligence, making him one of the smartest students at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. So, Brew's X gene mutation is only really mental or psychological in nature, but being a Brood, he brings natural body armor and fanged jaws to a fight, and recently, Brew actually consumed a king egg, making him king of the entire Brood species, including the Brood queens. Number 6. Big Bertha. Bertha Crawford, originally Ashley Crawford until she changed her name, had the mutant ability of total control over her body's physical size and mass. mass. She can add or take away hundreds of pounds to herself at will, controlling her figure. This allowed her to become the highest paid fashion model in America at one point, but also allowed her to don the Big Bertha superhero persona. Using her abilities to add bulk and mass, she actually increases her durability and her strength to a peak of lifting 50 tons, allowing her to jump huge distances like the Hulk. No matter what size Bertha alters herself to though, she has a high level of athleticism. Ashley rebranded herself into a plus size model, which is when she changed her name to Bertha, and you know what? She still kinda killed it. Good job. Number 5. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, on the cusp of the afterlife due to his hunger, his mutant powers activated. This gave him super strength and durability, alongside an extremely bestial form similar to like a minotaur, but almost as if it was made of stone. He's really super cool looking, honestly. But his more powerful ability would be empathic war infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he just went boom. He became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. Number 4. Warpath. James Proudstar is the younger brother of John Proudstar, also known as Thunderbird, and he always idolized his brother, but in that idolization he actually limited his own powers to a degree. Mostly, his mutation boosts up his physical capabilities, granting him super strength that has had various different levels, once having Hulk levels of strength, but another time struggling to fight an alligator. He can run at 100 miles per hour, and his stamina allows him to exert himself for 24 hours without rest. He can withstand a hell of a lot more than a regular human, like falling several stories or being hit with energy blasts. His agility and reflexes are increased to the point of dodging bullets, and his senses allow him to see in the dark and hear sounds other humans can't. After some training with Pete Wisdom, Warpath has shown the ability of self-propelled flight and a regenerative healing factor. What's really interesting is that while working with Ghost Rider, James gained shamanistic abilities like perceiving spirit energy. He's also probably one of the best mutant combatants, whether it's unarmed or armed with his vibranium daggers. Number 3. Gideon. I believe Gideon here is the first external to make this list. The externals include immortal mutants like Selene and Apocalypse, but they all share a psychic link which separates them from other immortal characters. Gideon was born during the 15th century, and aboard Christopher Columbus's first expedition, he actually succumbed to scurvy, and his life was changed forever when he resurrected and gained his mutant abilities. Like all externals, Gideon is immortal and no longer ages. He can also resurrect himself, as confusing as that sounds since he's immortal, but unique to him is the ability of power mimicry, giving himself the powers, advanced skills, and talents of any being, android, or even battlesuit, and he's been able to gain the powers of 3 people at once. But more than that, his powers allow him to fully understand how to use that other person's powers to the point that he can even overcome the original user of said power. Number 2. Cypher. Cypher, or Doug Ramsey, has omnilingual translation abilities, and considering that communication is an essential part of our everyday lives, whether that be with other humans, devices, or even our own selves, I'd say he's pretty powerful. He can translate language of literally any origin, even alien. He can read and decipher codes, including computer code, as well as read body language, subtext, and unspoken intention. More recently, everything he sees is interpreted as information, meaning he basically kind of just reads life. He can read body language to the extent he is able to predict people's moves before they make them. He can learn and perform spells for magic users, and he even created his own overly complex complex language that makes him immune to psychic mind reading. But Doug actually merged with Warlock, essentially giving Doug techno-organic shapeshifting abilities on top of everything else. And for our number 1 spot, we are going to talk about my number 1 favorite X-Men, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner was first introduced in Giant Size X-Men number 1 in April 1975, with the mutant ability to biophysically displace himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it with a subconscious sense, and then return back to our dimension in a different location, essentially teleporting. This all happens so fast it's almost instant, and it always is accompanied by the signature BAMF sound. Although he can teleport really far, even across the world more recently, he avoids teleporting to places he hasn't been before, or places he can't see, as he can accidentally end up appearing within solid matter, which could potentially end his life. Although he does have a small amount of spatial awareness that at least keeps his feet from teleporting into the ground, and he can even use the little demon things known as BAMFs as teleportation beacons that allow for teleportation to places he hasn't been before, even across dimensions. Through his unique physiology, he gains a few extra abilities as well, like a prehensile tail, microsuction hands and feet, and flexible bone structure, but he can also camouflage himself, bending light using the Brimstone dimension. But what a few might not know is that he actually became immortal thanks to the fact that recently he sacrificed his soul in heaven to come back to life, which is good because I never want to lose this legendary blue mutant. In at number 10 is Beltane. Beltane is a mutant you may likely not have heard of. Her real name is currently unknown, but we know she was part of a group of Romani gypsies. She was captured by the Latvarian monarch and awesome supervillain Dr. Doom and experimented on, which activated her latent mutant abilities, and also set off her desire to overthrow his rule with a group of other escapees. Now, Beltane's ability is the secret weapon of her group. She has the ability of fear projection, which means that she can physically project a manifestation of whatever the person she is facing most fears, psychically messing with and almost torturing her victims. So when fighting Wolfsbane, for example, Beltane made the hero see a projection of her not so nice father. Probably a mistake, as Wolfsbane eventually took her down in an animalistic rage, but hey, it's still a cool power. Coming in at number 9, Wolfsbane. Speaking of Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair has the mutant ability that I wish I had when I was a kid. She can turn herself into a wolf at will, and can even go into a transitional form that is basically a close to a werewolf without being a werewolf type of thing. In fact, she is basically a werewolf, but with none of the drawbacks of the monster. She retains all her faculties, minus not being able to talk and just being a little bit feral, and is not forced to change only at night. Rain grows much larger than her human form when she changes, and gains access to some enhanced strength, which, coupled with the body of a wolf, grants her enhanced speed and reflexes as well. She gains heightened senses similar to a wolf. The thing with Wolfsbane is that she is both a wolf and a human, so she gains the benefits of both, like almost stacking on top of each other. Unlike wolves, or humans for that matter though, she does have an enhanced healing factor and enhanced vision as well, so double thumbs up. Number 8, Abigail Brand. Abigail here is an interesting character. She is technically a human-alien hybrid, as her father hails from the planet Axis, but it's actually her human mother who Brand inherited her mutant abilities from, that allowed her to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then SWORD as an agent and hero. So what are said abilities? Well, she has a form of pyrokinesis known as tactile pyrokinesis, which means that Brand can coat at least her hands in flames that are potent enough to burn through most metals via tactile contact. She can use her abilities to warm up others, but has enough control that she can also set others on fire. So she has some versatility with said abilities. I somewhat kind of prefer her form of pyrokinesis because, I don't know, I just swear there are way too many fire-based heroes who seem to all do similar things. So at least Abigail has her own brand of fire. Sorry, the dad jokes are in full force today. Number 7, Primal. Adam Berman first appeared in X-Men Unlimited number 16 in July 1997, and his story arc was one I actually had a good time reading. It was oddly unique. at least to me. Adam is a mutant, but his ability is a transformative one, and he can easily hide it, which allowed him to kind of play himself off as a non-mutant even though he was trying to join the Xavier Institute. That's what I gathered, at least. It was kind of confusing. So you should read his story, but we are here for his abilities, not his story. And those said abilities almost remind me of other superpowered beings like the Hulk and even the Lizard, because Adam can transform into a totally primal reptilian-like form, growing about 50% bigger than his normal self and gaining red glowing eyes. But his physical enhancements are quite impressive. His strength boosts to around a level 10, with the highest level being a 100. But level 1 super strength is capable of pressing 800 pounds through a 25-ton range, so level 10 is nothing to scoff at. Look, just go read his story, okay? Number 6, Adam X. Another Adam! Almost like I liked that name or something. Adam Nuramani is honestly a bit more interesting than the last Adam though. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers of Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself like I just did, you can also say sanguine combustion, which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, which is cool. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. So couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and Extreme is someone you don't want to mess with. Coming in at number 5 is Shatterstar. So I was like this close to including Longshot on this list, but he doesn't even consider himself a mutant, and there's a whole bunch of weird time mojo verse stuff going on, so instead I'm going to do his father and or son, which is a whole other thing in itself. Look, all you need to know is we're talking about Shatterstar. Gavidra 7 learned the arts of battle as a warrior in arenas on Mojo World, where he developed both a sense of honor and incredible fighting skill, but those aren't his abilities. He possesses a large superhero starter pack. Superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, durability, senses, reflexes, agility, dexterity, coordination, balance, plus a regenerative healing factor and even enhanced learning ability. Curiously though, he actually has hollow bones, which makes him a shim lighter than you would think he is, but also further boosts up his natural physical skills. The cool part of Shatterstar though are his Mojoverse swords, which he can use through his mutant ability to channel powerful vibratory shockwaves, which can be absolutely devastating but also kind of drains him of energy. But after his Mojo time, he can now create X-shaped portals as well that have to be linked to another person who acts as an anchor for said portals. These also drain him of energy, and he has a cooldown of about like 4 days before he can do it again, because this powerhouse needs some kind of balancing. Number 4, Aurora. In the last part of this series, we talked about Northstar, but that mutant has a sister, and guess what? Surprisingly, the mutant gene runs in the family. That shouldn't be surprising really, because genes and all that. Wow, this is a horrible intro. Janine Marie Beaubier, otherwise known as Aurora, can generate a bright light, which according to the wiki is equivalent to 500,000 foot candles. Or if you aren't weird, it's about as strong as a lighthouse light, which is also an extremely weird frame of reference, but I digress. She and her brother can both do this by varying the rate of acceleration of the molecules of their bodies out of phase with one another, thereby generating a cascade of photonic discharges. The light can actually do some interesting things, like she can make a calming light that can even interrupt psychic control, or she can make concussive light blasts. Or, which is even cooler, she can even create lightning blasts that actually do some considerable damage. Like her brother, she can also move incredibly fast, and thanks to her molecular manipulation, she can also be extremely durable, heal quickly, and even withstand all the g-force of moving so fast without doing those insane weird breathing exercises that pilots have to do. Number 3, Phantom X. I honestly kinda dread talking talking about Phantom X, but I also completely love this guy. When I first read a comic with him in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really, so now I'm gonna try and explain something to you that I do not fully understand myself. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or Jean-Philippe, if that's what you want to call him, was experimented on by Weapon Plus and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called EVA, or EVA. So there's some stuff to unpack there. EVA, or EVA, can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used as weapons, with Phantom X being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to Eva. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and can enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal, and his self-supremacy over his body and mind allows him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him without taking forever, but know that he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of smell. Please look into this character and try to make sense of him, because I need help. Number 2, Somnus. Carl Valentino is actually a new member of Earth's Mutants, first appearing in Marvel's Voices Pride #1 in June 2021. But canonically, he's been around for a while. He and Dakin actually had a one-night stand in 1967, a one-night stand in which Dakin dreamt of them having an entire life together, which caused Dakin to retrieve Carl's body in the modern day and bring it to Krakoa for revival. Except this dream was caused by Carl himself. That's because Somnus has the mutant power of Wannaromancy, which I'm almost certain I mispronounced, but I'm kind of proud of myself that I think I didn't. This means he has the ability to enter, broadcast, and even control dreams at will. He can render his opponents unconscious and is also able to bring others into his dreamscape. It's such a unique and interesting power, and it can allow him to live entire lifetimes within a dream, which in my nerd mind tells me he can learn and improve upon skills while dreaming, but don't take my word on that, I just kinda made that up. Only time will tell the multitude of ways his power shall be used in the future. And finally, at number 1 is WizKid. A computer genius and novice inventor, Takashi Taki Matsuya kind of has an unfair advantage in the inventor game. That's because WizKid here has the ability to technoform materials and rearrange parts of things to function to his specifications, even to the point of being contrary to the laws of nature and science. And he's even recently learned how to manipulate plants and even other mutant powers to create new technology. With this ability comes a natural psionic aptitude for seeing how components can work together, which lets him make things work even better using his mutant power. As for the using of other mutant abilities, it basically means he can see the use of individual mutant powers as components, coming together as a larger machine, or even being able to guide the linking and combination of mutant powers to work collaboratively together. So he's almost like a power strategist, which is really cool, on top of the awesome technology he can already create. All this basically comes together to make WizKid someone you would absolutely want on your side, wheelchair and all. Moving on to number 10 with Marrow. Of all the mutant powers out there, I think the one I would actively try to avoid having, if that was how it works, is the abilities of Marrow. Now Marrow's actual mutant ability is a hyper-accelerated metabolism, and it's through this that she's able to do what most people know her for, accelerated bone growth. She has the ability to control the growth, shape, and toughness of her bone structure, even having it protrude from her body and be used as weapons that she can remove. She can also use this ability to create a sort of armor. Now the only problem, and the reason I wouldn't want it, is that it hurts when she does it, and just imagine how much that would hurt, having your bones protrude from your body. No thank you, I'll pass. Luckily, she has a very rapid healing factor that also gives her enhanced strength, agility, and reflexes, and as a little bonus, this girl has 2 hearts, which allowed her to actually survive when she had one pulled out. Nice. Number 9, Eunice the Untouchable. Now, I gotta say the force field abilities of wrestler, criminal, and villain Eunice the Untouchable definitely have some major drawbacks. The positives are great. His force field can withstand blows from the Incredible Hulk. He can project his force field to move objects. He could also use the shield to be untouchable, hence the name, opening it up to be able to grab things and eat. Now, the drawback would come in the fact that there have been multiple times where Eunice had his abilities increased, but to a point he couldn't even control his own abilities. At this time, his shield would literally close him off from everything. He couldn't grab things, eat food, or even breathe oxygen, which caused him to even pass out on one occasion, which luckily deactivated his powers, allowing him to actually live. Maybe if he used his powers for good, the writers would make him less self-destructive, but these are the cards you're dealt, bro. Guys, if you are indeed enjoying this video, do make sure to give it a little thumbs up. It's all you gotta do to let us know that you're enjoying what you're seeing. Thanks, nerds. Appreciate you. And at number 8 is Pyro. St. John Allardyce is an Australian pyrokinetic mutant. He has the ability to control flame to grow in size and intensity and to even take on any form he desires. He has used flame to create almost solid creations he refers to as, quote, the living flame, which have been in the shape of gigantic claws, birds, or even golems. The size, power, and intensity of the fire beings Pyro created were limited only by the extent of his imagination, the degree of his concentration, and his force of will. The only problem for Pyro is that he cannot generate flames spontaneously. He needs a source, which has been flamethrowers in his costume, other allies like Lockheed, or like a lighter or something. He could also be burnt by any fire that wasn't under his direct control. Now, he used his abilities mainly for evil deeds and crimes, but since his resurrection on Krakoa after he died due to the legacy virus, he has gone on to join Kate Pryde's Marauders and got this crazy skull tattoo on his face. It's kind of cool, but also I wouldn't do it, but you know, whatever. Number 7, Strife. You know, a lot of the characters on these lists have come into contact with the character of Strife. And while most people do know how powerful Strife is, I think not including him on this far into this series is kind of a sin. So, Strife is actually a clone, created by Mother Ascani and taken by Apocalypse, a clone of Nathan Summers, whom most of you know as Cable. Strife is essentially what Cable could have been had he not been infected by the techno-organic virus that he needs to use his powers to constantly keep at bay. Without that limitation, just like Cable, Strife is an Omega level telekinetic, at least that's what he calls himself, and it's stated that he is the 3rd most powerful one on Earth. He is able to do almost all of the other things telepaths of his level are capable of, plus powerful defensive and offensive telekinetic powers. But he is also cybernetically enhanced to have superhuman physical attributes thanks to Apocalypse. Strife is an incredibly powerful villain, not to be taken lightly at all. And at number 6 is Reaper. Pantu Hurageb has some interesting abilities to say the least. When he first appeared as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front, Reaper had the ability to generate a paralyzing effect on others that slowed their mobility and reaction times. He would usually use his scythe as a conduit for this ability, and it could even fully paralyze victims. But later, Reaper was enhanced by the Weapon X program, who gave him cybernetic prosthetic arms that could take different shapes, although you likely won't be surprised to hear they usually took the form of scythes that would still act as a conduit for his abilities. Unfortunately, Reaper did lose his abilities on M-Day, only to regain them again and then have them drained again. So he doesn't have any powers right now, I'm pretty sure. Or they're like diluted or something, I don't know. Number 5, Dragoness. For Tamara Kurtz, she was born a mutant directly because of the nuclear fallout caused by Hiroshima that her parents were exposed to, which is a different reason than a lot of other mutants, which to me makes her more interesting. She only debuted in 1990, so she's only been around for about 30 years, but she has certainly established herself as a powerful mutant so far, displaying the ability of bioelectricity generation, kind of like an eel. No, I'm just kidding. She's not like an eel. She usually uses this electricity in electrical blasts and pyrotechnic flares, which she used as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. Since her introduction, she has also been seen as a vampire, after which she died and has since been revived, so she may or may not not still be a vampire as well? I have no idea. Also, for a while she was equipped with these biotechnic pair of wings, which in the House of M were actually completely organic. I'd be stoked to see her show up again in comics and maybe expanded upon. I don't feel like there are many electricity-based mutants, so it'd be kinda cool. Number 4. Slab. A lot of you liked seeing Thumbelina in part 7 of this list, but what about her brother? Chris Anderson was a member of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys, and his life before this time isn't very well known. He has abilities similar to his sister. Where she can decrease in size, Slab has been shown to increase in size, getting stronger and more durable as he does so. Later on, he joined the Mutant Liberation Front, and even more recently than that, he has been seen on the mutant nation of Krakoa, where he went on to join up with Sword as part of their security division. Number 3. Vincente. He isn't really the most impressive of characters, although his abilities are certainly interesting, even if he usually gets defeated. On Earth 616, Vincente was a member of M-Plate's Hellions team. He had the ability to change his body from solid, liquid, or gas forms. Now as a gas or liquid, he has been shown to be able to mix himself in with other materials and substances. So, for example, he once mixed himself in with some soup. Or, in the Age of Apocalypse world, he became wine inside a bottle. Over time, he further developed his abilities so that in his gas form, he could now render himself poisonous if inhaled. He was defeated twice, and since the last defeat, he hasn't really appeared more. Not yet at least, so let's cross our fingers and hope he shows up. Number 2. Skids. Sally Blevins, otherwise known as Skids, has a long history in Marvel Comics, being involved with many other mutant characters and teams from Magneto and Charles Xavier to the Morlocks and Terminators. First introduced in X Factor number 7 in August 1986, Skid's mutant ability is to create frictionless force fields that protect her from pretty much all physical attacks, falls, energy weapons, and projections. It can also allow her to kind of skate at a bit of speed given the frictionless nature of these force fields. She can also use her force fields to extend to others if she focuses. There was one really cool moment when she protected Avalon from breaking up upon re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere with help from Jean Grey. That was really cool. So if you ever check that out, check it out. That made no sense. Whatever. Let's move on. Number 1. Wind Dancer. Sophia Mantiga was increasingly isolated at a young age, being ignored by her father, Walter Barrett, after the death of her mother and being told to not use her powers. Now Sophia finally reached a breaking point. She entered into one of her father's grocery stores and let loose a hurricane inside of it. After she was arrested by police, Mr. Barrett was confronted by Danielle Moonstar, who saw Sophia on the news. She, persuaded him to enroll Sophia into the Xavier Institute. Sophia Mantiga has aerokinesis that she uses to amplify small vibrations in the air and draw far-off sounds to her ears. She can also disrupt the equilibrium of others with compressed air, lift herself off the ground for flight, create sharp forces of wind that can cut through material, and she even creates isolated whirlwinds or direct blasts of high-pressure air control. And she can manipulate the movement of air, but this is all before she was depowered. She has been a part of the Marauders, X Corporation, New Warriors, and New Mutants squad.
Number 10. Sonic Flight. Even with Sean Cassidy's accepted superhuman vocal stamina, this ability appears to be an odd one that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Banshee can produce a sonic scream, which he can use as a form of sonar, to injure those he fights with in battle and to shield himself or others, or disorient his enemies. Sure, that makes sense. But he also uses his sonic scream to fly, which would make sense if he were just using the ability to, say, fly up to the second story of a building. But he has used this ability to fly longer distances as well, like over the ocean and stuff. However, in order to remain altitude and stay in the air, he has to keep screaming. So wait, how does he breathe? Well, we know he has enhanced vocal stamina, but this still doesn't really explain long trips. The answer is that he uses a winged gliding suit that allows him the time he needs to apparently breathe. However, without his winged gliding suit, his sonic flight powers would be pretty much useless. So yeah, kind of a weird ability. Number 9. Tentacles. Tentacles. Not to say that tentacles are inherently bad, by the way. They aren't, but what they are is kinda random, especially in this case. The tentacles I wanted to talk about here were Callisto's random tentacles. Callisto never really had tentacles until the early 2000s, but Where did they come from? After all, she was introduced in the 1980s without them, and they just kinda seemed to appear one day. Mask was to blame for this alteration to Callisto's look, though she still had her famous eye patch at the time. She has never lost that, by the way. Mask gave Callisto tentacles to torment her. After he was defeated once more, she decided to actually keep them instead of be changed back. Not because they were useful, but because she refused to bargain with Mask anymore, so she just decided to accept them. She was like, I'm cool with these tentacles. The super weird thing is, although they were not a mutation of her own, they still disappeared along with her powers during the events of M-Day. Huh? Number 8. Superpower manipulation. This is one that people can't seem to wrap their heads around because, well, it's just too overpowered, and why Hope Summers isn't utilized in the comics as often as someone of her power level could be, or maybe should be depending on your opinion. Superpower manipulation is a weird one because it basically isn't a power that has any inherent weaknesses attached to it. You can do whatever you need to with that power. The possibilities are pretty much endless. In giving Hope this power, they created something virtually undefeatable. But when we read comics, the struggle is what we usually most enjoy exploring and reading about. So from a writer and storyteller context, this makes Hope's power a hard one to feature and use in comics, which is why you might notice stories that involve her don't usually focus on her insane power set. Number 7. Unlimited magics. I feel like people often forget that Illyana Rasputin's real mutant power is teleportation. She's a teleporter. And yet we all get more wrapped up in her magical abilities, her soul sword. Magic actually only has such powerful magical abilities because she was kidnapped by Belasco when she was very little, which is pretty weird. Just because she was tied to Limbo through her teleportation powers, where Limbo is basically a stepping stone for her while teleporting, she now just has unlimited magical power? Huh? Also, that whole story of Belasco kidnapping young Illyana, basically torturing her, and yet admiring and cherishing her as his protege all at the same time is just pretty odd and nonsensical to begin with. Number 6. Flaming prehensile tongue. Toad has all sorts of odd abilities, but one of the most bizarre and odd by far is his prehensile tongue. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but Amanda, he's Toad. Sticky prehensile tongue should make sense for any amphibian-based mutants. But what about when we decide to make it flaming? Yeah, I know, right? That's weird. That was an update that Toad's tongue saw in the comics. Why? I guess because it looked cool. But his tongue was already not a super useful power to have, and adding flames, it doesn't really make it any more useful. It does make it look cooler though, I guess.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing happens to everything else.
Number 5. Eggs. There's a few occurrences of this with mutants. Angel Salvador has this ability due to her insect physiology. It doesn't really do much as a power for her, it's just part of the way that she reproduces. Though it is pretty creepy and a little gross. But then again, so is most stuff involving the creation of new life, am I right? One of the other now remarkably famous mutants who have had this weird ability? Gold Balls, who now actually goes by the name Egg. He actually changed his code name due to the revelation regarding his powers. Originally, we just thought Gold Balls emitted gold bouncy balls out of his body, which seemed pretty odd and well, kinda useless. But then we realized in the events of Dawn of X that these gold balls were actually infertile eggs, which is also kinda useless. Unless, that is, you have the other 4 insanely powerful members of the mutant group known as the Five around you. When matched up with Elixir, Tempest, Hope Summers, and Proteus, Egg's abilities revealed themselves as being mighty useful, as together the 5 can combine their power sets in order to resurrect any of their fallen comrades. Still weird, but also kinda now amazing? Number 4. Aviation. The power of aviation through non-telekinetic means, that is. Most mutants that can naturally fly usually have this power as a result of a physical mutation. Some are simply granted wings, like Angel or Pixie, who otherwise find themselves looking like a standard human exteriorly, but some find themselves with a full-on bird-like mutation, like Beak. Beak's aviation mutation, depending on the artist, can leave him looking pretty all-out freaky. He's either drawn like a full-on bird person, or sometimes like a hybrid bird-human. His aviation mutation barely even gives him flight abilities as well. He isn't great at flying, but he can manage to do it for very short distances if he really tries. So why does he look like a bird then? It's not really useful. Number 3. Hollow bones. Speaking of flight-related mutations, one common trait that you'll see presented as a power or a perk is hollow bones. Angel and Beak both have hollow bones. What it's supposed to help with in regards to those mutants is help them accomplish the ability to fly. And I mean, usually it does by making them significantly lighter, but also hollow bones sound like something terrible to have in the midst of a battle. Somehow Angel has been presented as being very durable, despite the fact that his hollow bones have to exist in order for his flight powers to work and make sense. But if his bones are hollow, then shouldn't punches from foes with super strength cripple the poor original X-Men team member? Like what?
My only regret is that I have bonitis.
Number 2. Become ice cream. So far we've only seen this very specific mutant power once, and only in one single issue, and not even an issue of X-Men either, but instead Obnoxio, the clown's own series. One issue series. The mutant who possessed this ability? Ice Cream. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I know, a very original name. Ice Cream. Ice Cream used his abilities to infiltrate the X-Mansion, planning to put an end to the super team because their abilities made him feel ridiculous by comparison. I mean, I don't blame him. How he expected to accomplish this, however, with his power set being so useless, well, I have no idea. Number 1. Love Eyes. In all new Dupe, we gotta learn even more about Dupe's capabilities. Well, we don't really know what Dupe is still exactly. He has been a member of the X-Men, and hasn't been confirmed either way in regards to his mutant status, or, well, any other status for that matter. We don't know if he's an alien, or if he was made in a lab, or what's really going on with him. None of it's really fully been confirmed. What we do know is that he has a slew of insanely powerful and ridiculously cartoonish abilities. One such ability is Love Eyes, which seems to have no real specific purpose. Kitty Pryde suspected that he was using his love eyes to try and enchant her, casting a love spell on her, but Dupe claimed that they're just how he shows affection. Ineffective love spell or just a weird quirk. Either way, they're pretty irrational.